how do we start to honor the feminine again in all of life? So that is the body, that's the emotions, that's the heart, that's earth. We've been inherently conceptual and intellectual in the way we approach all of life. We basically are here when we say who we are. We've forgotten that this is like sacred and holy. And so the collective awakening and what's happening right now is starting to understand that actually it's safe to start to come down again. We need to start to experience the body, matter, the mother as sacred again. In order for everything to come back into balance, we need to remember that we're inherently connected to the cycles of the earth. We're inherently connected to the earth, but we've forgotten because we've been inherently disembodied, because patriarchy is inherently overly to do with the intellect, to do with concept, to do with living from here. Emotions bad, body, sexuality like bad or slightly disordered. As in, I'm also talking about awakening. So like the awakening path inherently on life is being transcendent. It's like, let's try and reach an imaginary God, man in the sky out there. Let's put the sacred out here. But actually, what needs to happen is to remember that the sacred is here. And for women, this inherently happens because, for example, our moon cycle is 28 days. It links with our womb. We're inherently connected to life differently from men. So women need to remember this in order for life to remember it, in order to everyone to remember that we're inherently connected to life. And when we remember, we can start to come back into balance again. So it's really about remembering the feminine, not just women, the feminine within all of life.
Welcome back, people, to another episode. I have the founder of Heart of a Rose Festival here in the UK on the show today. Her name is Sophie Nevill. She's also a psychotherapist and a meditation teacher. We speak about all these things and the common thread in her life, which is reconnecting herself and others back to that connection with themselves to live in more harmonious ways, in right relationship with themselves, in health and state. Enjoy the episode, interact with us in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you're finding the channel, content valuable. Enjoy. I'd love to ask you, what's the kindest thing you've said to yourself today?
What a question. Oh, that's a big one.
I think you started that one.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Thank you for the reflection. Yeah, I don't know, actually. I've been in a bit of a stress response because I'm just holding so much at the moment, so I haven't really stopped to reflect, but actually, yeah, just I'm doing really well. I'm proud of myself. I'm doing really well.
Yeah, but it can also happen right now, like in this moment.
Yeah, I think that's
what would the kindest thing be? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that feels good. I'm doing really well, and yeah, safe to. I think the kindest thing I did for myself more than actually said today was just take some time to lie on the grass. And I really needed that. And even my flatmate was just like, well done, Sophie. I'm like, thank you. So yeah, today was more an action than word. But and the stillness that we just sat in before felt really good. I do that usually 1 to 2 hours a day, and I've just been so busy I haven't had a chance. So that felt sweet. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. It is intriguing for me to lean into that. I definitely get stuck in those habits and patterns and familiarities, which feel safe, but not good for me. Just constantly doing, always on. Do you feel like in your life you go through seasons of busy? Because I would say something I observe in you is this calming energy, and from your voice and the way you speak, it helps me slow down actually in the time that we have spoken. I don't know if you get that reflected to you, but I feel you have that kind of slower, calmer sense. Is that the majority of the year, or do you have busy periods? How does it work? How's it look?
Like a duck that's like paddling really fast underneath, but seems
Can't
okay.
see.
No, I think yeah, I do feel like I can drop in if I give myself the space. I can drop in very quickly to a very deep state of peace, and apparently that's in my gene keys. It's something about my actual what I've come here to do or share. But I think because I'm physically organizing probably more than even 2 or 3 people should be at this moment, it it's hard to drop into sometimes. And I think it, I don't know how deep to go with this question, but or like honestly this question, I think this year has been especially busy because I've been building this festival, Heart of the Rose, and I kind of hoped last year we moved to a new site and we expanded quite significantly and we involved camping and all these other things. And I was like, okay, next year we've got the template now. It'll be so much easier for me to enjoy some time off. And then this year, my guides showed me that I was meant to birth a temple of medicine. I was meant to do Brotherhood of the Rose. I was meant to do everything, so many things on top of Heart of the Rose. So I wish to say that there's a cycle in it. I do try to honor my own cycles, and I'm hoping this October, November to step back. But it's been pretty consistent, I'd say, last year. But I did have some pretty severe ankle injuries that made me slow down. So if I don't slow down, my body does for me.
I did hear actually that someone saw you at Love Jam and people
Oh
were
no,
carrying you around.
was
People,
that true? Who said that?
no, it was someone I met randomly.
Oh, great. So it's just being said. Yeah, I felt like it was so sad because I've been working so hard last year, like so hard. And then Heart of the Road's finished, and I was like, yes, now I get to party. It's Love Jam. This is amazing. If you'd seen the videos before the ankle injury, you would have been like, whoa, she's going for it. I was like having the best time, and then like got stuck under a gate. It was something ridiculous happened for gate. Like I fell over and very severely like injured my ankle, which still hasn't completely healed. So
Oh wow.
up in crutches the next day. So that was fun. There with me being like, yay, now I can rest and enjoy. But it was really now I can just not move. But yeah. So yeah, I'm glad someone saw me in that. They had to wheel me around in a buggy. Someone had a child's buggy, so that was helpful as well. I didn't want to miss out. I was like, I refused to miss out on this fun festival.
I'm sure it
Anyway,
can teach you a lot though, right? Like injuries and getting illness can teach you so much about needing, asking for help and actually, yeah, like moving so fast. It's actually something came up in a recent ecstatic dance that I did. And I always forget to mention like just honor your body a little bit more than you think you should because injuries are common when we're like so in the moment, like we can lose sense of our body and then we kind of reach for this altered state and then let go of the actual practical grounded physical body which
mhm.
also has its place of like no maybe I'm up here a bit too much and it's quite fascinating how that can teach us so much.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever done five rhythms? Or do you
Yes, yeah.
know the like I didn't know this, and I did five rhythms for years, and then I found out the kind of meaning behind each of the rhythms. Meaning behind
Mm.
the
Yeah, go
rhythms.
for it.
Like the kind of beginning one is the kind of flow state, which is kind of the birth state, and you want to have really grounded flow, so it's a very grounded energy, but it's
Mm.
about flowing with life and being flexible and moving without being like too rigid. And then the second one is staccato, where it's all to do with the boundaries and to do with kind of like the no stage, and then it's to do with chaos. And actually you reminded me about it when you were talking, because you want to have controlled chaos is the wrong word, but conscious chaos.
Mm.
Because I remember this teacher who actually I used to study with when I lived in America, who studied with Gabriella Roth, who created Five Rhythms, that she said you needed, if you go into chaos and you go and you let go too much and you go too unconscious and you go too high, you injure yourself. And it's very representative of life. Like you want to be able to let go, but you want to be in a place that's grounded and conscious in that, or else you're harming yourself, you're harming others. And then you have lyrical, which is old age, which is more kind of like reaching for the heavens and stillness. Anyway, I remember
Mm.
when I found that out, it changed the way I danced and the way I related to five rhythms, because it was so interesting to see where I had blocks in terms of like even boundaries. I remember just being like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's very well established by rhythm, so it has to be rooted in a good framework.
yeah.
It works. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think because I was DJing, I think I was just going too hard, too often, too quick, too soon. Because I have that tendency not slowing down in the music. But yeah,
Mm,
fascinating. Um,
mm.
So yes, you mentioned Heart of the Rose. Let's dive into that. Like it's coming up and yeah, you're busy. And how's it looking? Is this the second year, third year?
It's actually the fourth year.
Oh,
We're
wow.
counting the seed gathering, which I
Mm,
had to count because the seed gathering we had 50 women, so it was a good. It was. I mean, it was during lockdown, so we couldn't really do it too intensely. But yeah. So it's a fourth year. It's in 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks. It's in 2.5 weeks. Um, and we're gonna have 500 women hopefully this year, which feels really exciting. And yeah, it feels like it's growing. It feels like it's time. It feels exciting. It feels beautiful.
mm,
It feels really beautiful to just see this baby that I put a lot of energy in birthing, kind of finding her feet um, in the world. So, yeah.
So why events? Why bringing people together?
Why bring people together? Good question. Um,
Because that's at the foundation, isn't it? It really is
mm,
gatherings, events. Like there's so many moving parts in the modern day event festival, and
mm,
I know how consuming that can be, and it's a lot to take on just by wanting 500 people to meet in a field. It's like it seems to require so much, and there's no doing it minimally.
mm.
So yeah, I'd love to know like what pulled you into creating that, and maybe there was iterations of it. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, it's similar to the meditation. It's slightly in my design to want to bring people together, funnily enough. It's something that really is in my design, as in like every country I've ever moved to, I will literally gather um, uh, rather large communities together and friends together. And um,
Mm,
I feel like, the saying, the kind of where is it, where two or more gather, there I am. It feels that the more we gather, the more presence, the more light we can anchor, the more we can lift each other up, the more we can remember why we're here, why we came, our highest expression, our highest potential. We were never meant to do it alone. We've been conditioned to be alone. And yet, at this turning of the age, at this birth of a new age, we're needing to come together to like reactivate this forgotten memories within us of our potential and the light that we came here to birth. Yeah, so I think multi-leveled. I think if I was to speak specifically to the Women's Festival, I think it's really important for the women to remember and to gather again together because we've been conditioned to separate almost, and we've forgotten that we were literally hardwired to sync, that when we're in our menstrual cycle, we literally sync with other women around us if we live together. Like we are literally hardwired to connect. And yet we have been conditioned to compete, conditioned to be alone, and when, for example,
mm,
giving birth, becoming a mother, like there's very little support, and actually women were never meant to do these things alone, never meant to do these rites of passage alone, and we've forgotten. And it's kind of time to remember we can only really do that together. We kind of reactivate each other when in each other's presence. So
mm. Yeah, I'd add in comparison as well. Whenever competition's there, I always think compete, compare,
yeah, yeah,
different senses of that. But yeah, comparison creeps in when there's these borders and boundaries and
yeah.
social medias.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the common threads then, that you see time and time again that really remember allow you to remember why you keep doing it?
The common threads why I keep doing the Women's
Mm,
Festival, just um I feel like I actually got shown to do it. Like it wasn't really it wasn't, I'm going to run a women's festival.
mhm,
I got shown originally, I mean, to give some context if anyone's listening and interested, but um, uh, my family owned quite a bit of land. I had a vision at 18 that the reason my soul had incarnated onto this land and into this family was to create a temple of light, and create conscious gatherings. Even at that age, I stopped drinking at 18. So so funny, in England, usually you start in other countries drinking, but I stopped drinking at 18. I realized I wanted to do not alcohol-free events and organic farm, lots of different things. And so that was like 14 years ago, however long it is, 15 years ago. And I went on a big journey, became a psychotherapist, lots of other things, and then was going to create a festival in my late 20s called Awaken Festival, which was going to be about, which was going to be an embodied spirituality festival. How do we awaken to the one beyond the mind, and how do we start to bring that love down into this human form? And I had lots of teachers involved, and it was going to be amazing. And then lockdown happened, and I went to the land because I was really confused the way ahead, and I asked her what she wanted, and I prayed to this cedar tree, this very ancient tree on our land, and I said, what do you want? And then she showed me this women's festival. So for me, it was never like a conscious, personal, this is what I want, this is what I think should happen. It was just this deep knowing and kind of deep service that this is what I've being shown to do, this is what I'm here to do, like this is what feels right. And so in terms of like the common threads that kind of keep it going, it's just this unnameable faith and trust that this is just what is needed right now on the land. And as I see the land, it's almost like a microcosm of the macrocosm, and so it's kind of like what is needed ultimately in the planet at this time. And so seeing, like last year we had this beautiful older woman come, and her daughter, and she was 70, 80, I can't remember how old. She was so sweet. And I stood next to, because when you're running it, you don't really get to enjoy it. I don't really get to stop. I don't really get to really speak to people. And I remember it was Sunday evening, and I was like, I want to get a cacao. I hadn't really stopped, and I hadn't a cacao. I was like, I'm going to get a cacao. And I was in the queue, and right behind me was this really sweet older lady. And I was like, oh, did you enjoy the festival? And she was like, very seriously, she just looked at me. She was like, it changed my life. It completely changed my life. I didn't realize I had a voice, but I now know that I have a voice. I'm never going to forget it. I'm going to come until the day I die. And I was like, may that be in many, many years' time. She was like, may it be in many, many years' time. I'm going to be back every year. Like, and that kind of like, because I think for me anyway, I'm doing so much stuff behind the screen, so much stuff where I'm just kind of like always on my laptop, always doing stuff. And then when it's actually happening, it kind of like, it's very surreal. And to have that kind of, I mean, we've had so many emails like that, which has been so beautiful, and so many beautiful testimonials, and just to receive those and see how deeply it's touched people, it just makes it all worthwhile. So those are the threads that kind of keep it going, this kind of trust, faith, and seeing how beautifully it's helping people, hopefully.
Yeah, take us back to the vision. How did that look and feel for you? Like, so you went to the cedar tree, and like, could you give any more detail of like what the vision looked like? How did it feel in your body? And well, it sounded like a clear vision, like a really, this is happening. This is what I need to do.
Yeah, so I've been very, I met a shaman when I was 18, and I worked with her for 10 years, and she was an incredible lady. And through that, I started becoming very psychic with my visions, and would have dreams, and like, I mean, very clear dreams. I would get shown, I moved to America because I got shown for a dream. I studied to be a psychotherapist, got shown for a dream, like so many things.
Wow.
And when I pray to this tree, this was an interesting one because usually I get shown it in my dreams, or I get shown not as real as this. Like this was like really fascinating, because what was most powerful about this was what then happened after. So I prayed to the cedar, and I had other visions. So for example, at Awaken Festival, which I'll maybe share a bit more because this is ultimately where it's all leading to, but Awaken Festival, when I had that dream, I asked my guides, is this really what I'm being shown? Because I got this download, and I was like, is this true? And then when I had that experience, I went out for a walk. This was in real life, and like 5 herons like circled above me for the entire walk. And I was asking the land, is this what is meant to happen? And then I had a dream that night, and Deepak Chopra turned up, and the entire land was just intense, and it said Awaken Festival, and he was like, this is going to be really big. And what was really bizarre is he ended up turning up on the land in real life for some other random festival. He was flown over from America. It was just very bizarre. Okay, this is what's meant to happen. I'll share a tiny bit more later. It's ultimately what is going to happen in 5 years, what it's all leading to. But with Heart of the Rose, I went and walked, and I walked I went around and I walked back into our garden, my family's garden, and as I opened the gates, I just saw women all across the garden, and I saw these two friends of mine running towards me, and I just got the words, if you do a women's festival, the women will come to support. Because at that time I was also feeling quite confused about Awaken. The person I was going to do it with, who was going to maybe help me, had moved to Costa Rica during lockdown. Anyways, they said, if you do it, then someone will come to support. And these two friends were running towards me. Anyway, I had to go through so much in order to birth that, because my family didn't want it, even though it was a tiny, tiny little thing. The amount of ancestral clearing I had to do on the land was huge. I mean, so huge. I wasn't allowed to have it until 3 weeks before. I had to, it was insane. But I just kept trusting that the vision was clear. And when it actually happened, I went out of the gate, because we put some of the yurts outside of the gate. And I went to go pick something up, and I walked through the gate, and all of a sudden, I mean, it's bizarre, even though I get chills just thinking about it, literally to the T, this vision, exactly that I'd seen a year and a half before, was in the garden. And it wasn't two friends at the time, it was actually a new friend who I didn't even know at that time, was literally walking towards me. And it was so surreal that I had to video the whole thing, because I was like, oh my God. But it was almost, it had already happened. I believe in quantum time, that things are already happening. It was just like a timeline that I had been shown that was already existing, and I just was bringing it more into the field. But yeah, it was bizarre. I mean, even crazier stuff has happened since, but that was crazy. That was just surreal for me, because sometimes we get these moments where you're like, oh yeah, we really are multidimensional.
Yeah. Wow. Firstly,
Yeah.
I I think this is fascinating. I've had dreams before. It's generally like things that I don't want to happen, and then they do happen. A little bit opposites going on. Like I remember in school, I had this like really vivid, because it's like for me, it's always been intuition, and then it's manifested in my dream, and then it's come true. So like I was with a girl in school, and had this dream that she finished it, and she did, and I was like, yeah, I know. And it just like those things happen to me. But do you think there needs to be space for this stuff to come through, for you to be more of, I'm gonna use some probably lazy terminology, but to be like a clear channel or a clean vessel to actually connect to these bigger, more collective needs, let's say? Like, do you notice when you're not seeing certain things and you're a bit blocked or murky, or things aren't so clear? And then when they are clear, like the things that you're doing in your day to day, could you speak a little bit about that? Because I think that's quite interesting.
So, like, so many threads I could say
Go
on
for
this.
it. Tell us the wackiest stuff.
Watch out. I won't do that.
Permission.
Um, so firstly, like, women were the original oracles, but they have forgotten. Like, we were the original ones that
Mhm.
people would come to, because during the red tent, during our menstrual, the womb was finished, the veils were finished, so we could connect higher. Like, that was literally our role, but we've been conditioned to forget again this intuitive path. So I genuinely feel this is a very natural way of being that we've just forgot, because the egoic mind has just got so veiled with distortion and other things. And I believe it's for all genders. Like, we all have this intuitive ability. There's an amazing school I was watching recently where they teach children, they wear blindfolds, and they teach children to see without their eyes and just using their third eye. I mean, it's amazing. I think there's one in England. It's very incredible. I'll
Wow.
send it if you're interested. But these are things that are like natural, but we've just
Mm.
forgotten. And for me, this kind of goes back, but so when I was in my early 20s, I had a very profound awakening where the personal self, Sophie, that I had taken myself to be, dissolved. She was no more. When I was doing a walking meditation, and I said, if I'm really not my mind, I'm really not my thoughts, which is the path of Advaita, which is non-dual path. I'm really not my mind, not my thoughts. Who am I? And all of a sudden, Sophie dissolved. I was everything. I was nothing. I was fully conscious, hadn't taken any drugs, no plant medicine, just fully there. suddenly all my past lives came, and I was like a movie almost in front of me. I was like 22, 23. I was training as a psychotherapist at the time, lots of other things. During those 3 weeks, because it dissolved, and then it slowly started to come back. But that experience never left. But what happened was things manifested very quickly. I was able to get like very quick intuition and just move with it, because there was no veils of the mind or conditioning that was stopping it, because it was just life meeting life. So I believe the more we rest, and which is what I teach, the more we rest and dissolve the mind into the stillness of the heart, the more present we become, the more we can tap into this ever present collective field. We could say the unconscious mind, we could say, give it infinite words, presence, God, the divine. The more we can hear these things, see these things, connect to our higher self, which sees from a higher perspective and can show us the next step. I genuinely believe our higher self wants to support us and wants us to show us the way. It's only our limiting beliefs that may block it. And so I believe the more we can clear those by resting more, putting our attention more in the stillness than on the noise of the mind, the more we can allow the mind to be quiet, the more we can listen and open ourselves to what wants to be heard. And I think in the past, awakening has predominantly been, I'm not my mind, I'm not my body, I'm going to stay as awareness, I'm just going to witness my mind, that's it. And what's actually happening and needed most, which is ultimately what Heart of the Rose is and what I teach, is like actually coming back into the world with that sense of presence, with that deeper connection to source in every moment, beyond the noise and narrative of the mind, so that we can take action from there and move from there, that we're actually needed to take action. We can't just sit in a monastery cross-legged up a mountain. Like, we actually need to awaken to this deeper aspect of ourselves and then move from that place to be truly of service to the world. Because it's not really me, it's not the limited me that's of service. The limited me, ideally, is kind of dissolving more and more into the heart, so a greater me can start to kind of move this being.
Yeah. How much do you think the belief holds us back? And now we're in these times where we are really, probably more than ever, more finite in how we think and how what we believe is possible. And we all know the power, the healing power of the placebo, which is the power of belief. And then the opposite is true also. So you have the nocebo. So not believing things aren't possible are going to really allow them to be not possible. Thinking that you are constantly a certain way. I don't know. I notice it in people that say, oh, I'm so clumsy. They'll be more clumsy because they believe it so prolifically. So you can literally speak into being your own demise by being so finite with your words. So how much do you think the belief is how much of a part of it is, and your teachings, do you really work with people's rigid minds, let's say?
Good question. So for me, the priority is actually always to connect them first to the stillness. Because if we're trying to fight the mind with the mind, then we're going to lose. We want to move towards the mind from a place of presence that recognize these thoughts aren't even ultimately arts, they're just conditioned memories. I mean, I'm going very cosmic. I'm very going deep right now. Like the thoughts themselves that we have identified with, it's limited person, it's limited thought. I mean, ultimately, once you truly see the mind for what it is, you realize actually even the self Sophie is just a thought. Even Chris is just a thought. It's just, there's no weight in it. And so when we can truly start to see all beliefs from that perspective, then it's kind of like we can forgive them, we cannot take them seriously, we can start to see them for what they are, which is just conditioning. We can bring more kindness to them. And so for me, with anyone I work with, I usually try and help them to first become aware that they're even aware of their thoughts, but they're inherently not really their thoughts or beliefs at all. And then from that place, not bypassing the thoughts, but actually moving towards and being like, okay, well, where? So I teach a 6-week course called The Journey of Awakening, which we go through this very deeply, where the first week really is, it's the stillness. So it's how do we connect to the stillness of God that we are inherently beyond this limited mind that we've taken ourselves to be. And then the second week is all to do with kind of what I do with psychotherapy, which is how do we then work with this personal self, this unique human incarnation, and the trauma that we may have experienced in it, and the attachment styles we may have developed unconsciously through it, and how do we start to create a secure attachment style with ourselves. Third week is the holy body, fourth week's the soul. And the soul perspective is actually when we start to talk about, or I start to share about limiting beliefs. And I explain it a bit like this. And this is the work I did with a shaman. This is the work of psychotherapy. This is the work, my own personal journey. I try and explain it like this, is that you can just think about the light that we are, the light of our soul comes to earth. And then we program that light that's inherently unlimited with veils of distortion and limitation and certain karma that we may have chosen to heal and rebalance. We veil it. And because the nature of life is holographic, as in it's literally a projection of our thoughts. So like if I have a belief unconsciously that men are useless, I
I love it. I'm sure that gets a lot of laughs at the Women's Festival.
Yeah, definitely not. Um, then that is what I'll be attracting, because that is the veil through which I'm unconsciously seeing, and because nature, because life is inherently neutral and actually literally objective and just merely reflecting our beliefs back to us, that's what I'll be shown. So if we can start to see it like that and see that we've kind of pre-programmed ourselves with these things, we can start to have forgiveness, we can start to have perspective, we can start to be like, okay, do I want to believe this anymore? We can start to, I speak about this a lot, like we've been living as like spiritual children where we are kind of like looking outside of ourselves for someone to blame or someone to save us. And actually we're about to step into our spiritual adulthood as a collective, where we start to see actually we create our reality through our beliefs on such a deep level that I don't think the mind can even fully grasp how much it can create through its beliefs and its frequency and its vibration. But we also want to have a lot of compassion, because as we know, 95% of mind is unconscious. So it's not like we're creating from a conscious place. But I work with another shaman right now, and the therapy she uses is actually to clear the unconscious mind, because the hope once we incarnate is actually to become aware of these unconscious things, clear them, and replace and reprogram ourselves with more conscious, loving belief systems that is in alignment with the stillness. And that's why the stillness is so powerful, because for me, the more we rest in the stillness, the more we turn our mind instead of out there on the world and back in on the stillness and the presence that we are, and the unlimited nature that we are, naturally, because wherever we put our attention to grows, that is what will start to grow. And because the nature of life is holographic, that's what we start to see reflected more to us in the world, rather than maybe beliefs in scarcity or stories of scarcity that we've been conditioned.
Yeah, and conditioning really is environment. I see it as like accents, like we don't even know it's happening, and our voice is changing and be influenced so much by our environment. So that really is conditioning. Now, is this even possible for someone to do you recommend people take some time to look at this stuff, or can they do it alongside a 9 to 5? Can they do it in the world, or is it too hard and too scary to then go into work and think, okay, so you were all holograms? I'm trying to like find the words for what that feels like, because I'm not in, that's not my life, that's not my world, but I know this stuff can be scary for people. So I'm curious to know, like, the people you work with, like, do you create, I mean, a container like you offer, like a 6 week deep dive or holding of some sort, can be extremely beneficial, I know. But yeah, what would you say to that?
So, yeah, I wouldn't with my, well, would I with my therapy clients say straight away that life is holographic? Because also what
Yeah.
happens, what can start to happen is when we say we create our reality, the mind latches onto that and then starts to
Yeah.
judge itself and be like, I've done something wrong, something's happened. And this is my whole thesis was on this, but more related to health and how
Mm.
it's a reflection of the mind and the unconscious mind.
Hmm.
And that's why it's really important to understand it from a greater perspective, as in we're not doing it consciously. If anything, you said, like, is it important for people to kind of become aware of this, and can they do it in their 9 to 5 job? Inherently, we create our reality whether we're conscious of it or not. We're doing it day to day, every day. And so to start to become conscious of that is, I think, a gift, because we want, and to do it in the smallest way. Like, you can do it wherever you are 9 to 5, because if you have a difficult partnership or you don't have enough money, that's showing you that there's a block or distortion, because our inherent nature is health, abundance, light, unlimited. If there is something in your life that is not reflecting that in some way, and we could go so deep, and this is why I do a 6 course, because there's obviously the argument that, like, okay, yeah, but if you're living in a third world country and you're in a war zone, then, like, there's a lot of misunderstanding in terms of, like, we create our reality in that. Like, it can be really deeply misunderstood, and why it's really important to go, that I create this container to take people really, really deep into this, so that they can truly understand that it's not we create our reality.
I
And
know,
that
yeah. Well, the
we can,
world existed in a certain way before you were even in it. So it's not to say that you being born into it has changed it because you're in it. You know, it's more of like things are happening, but they keep happening in a certain way because you're at a certain level. And I, it's important to throw that in because, yeah, when we lean into this stuff and mindset's everything and life's happening for you, and then you look at the state of the world and think, well, it's clearly it's 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 not always beneficial to see it that way because it's also it can be very individualistic to see things in this way, rather than this is a collective. um let's say we need a collective shift, and it's gonna take a lot of people and maybe some time, rather than everyone within it to be on them. And I think when people start learning about this stuff, fundamentally, when you start to realize that it makes sense that the world is a reflection of you, and where you're currently at, you do have a lot of say in how you respond and co-create with it. We have more say than we probably give ourselves credit for. Um, I know that the perspective, because life is about perspective. You've got two people in very similar situations, but living very different lives. I realized recently, it's not profound, but I realized recently that what I think about my life is actually how good it is. Not not it on its own in isolation, because how good I think it is, or what I'm perceiving the situation to be, is dependent on how I'm perceiving it, and that is on me to, yeah, respond to it and judge it in a way. And there's no good or bad. Thinking makes it so. So everything is neutral, and it really resonated when you said that everything really is neutral, but we have stories, narratives, and relationships with things that, but then keep us kind of stuck within it, and we don't have to be. So it's good to deconstruct this stuff, because I'm not someone on a podcast that's gonna talk for 90 minutes and speak about mindset and perspective being everything, because I don't believe that um is all of the conversation. So yeah, um I'd love to ask actually what freedom means to you, because I think that's a big part of this. Like, because freedom is such an interesting word. Because I still don't know really what it is. I don't know what it means, because there's so many ways into it, but maybe it does feed into what we're talking about. What does it mean to be free?
mm, mm. There was so much you shared in that. I'm like,
Yeah, there was a whole host of randomness.
but important. I think
Mm,
whenever we bring up the concept of we create our reality, and that the world's a reflection of our beliefs, there is so many ways we could go with that. And
mm,
There's a really beautiful book that I'd love to recommend people that are listening called The Nature of Personal Reality.
Mhm.
That is so beautiful that it speaks on the level of beliefs. And what I learned most deeply just before I asked say about freedom with the shaman I worked for, I mean, literally every week she was incredible. She would just look at you and she would tell you your entire life story. You wouldn't have to say things. She'd tell you every lifetime you've lived, every dimension you've lived, all these different things. And so I worked for 10 years every week. And what I learned is that we can never truly understand sometimes why we're experiencing what we're experiencing necessarily, or the things that have led up to it. And I'm mentioning that in terms of the amazing things that are happening in the world and the most horrific things that are happening in the world. And at the same time, it's like both and at the same time, our frequency, our thoughts, our beliefs do create, because it's inherently a vibrational frequency.
Mhm.
Earth that we live in, whether we're conscious of it or not, what we are putting out, we inherently get back. And that's not to say that we're doing it consciously. A lot of time we're doing it unconsciously, and to bring kindness and love to that. But we don't have to, sorry, I'm just going on a slight tangent because it's such a
Mhm.
deep, I say freedom. We don't have to, we don't have to go looking for our beliefs. If we just look at our life will show us what we believe.
Yeah,
When we
sure.
truly understand that, then we can start to change. And
Mm.
because we are inherently connected, although we've been conditioned to believe we're separate.
Mhm.
When we change for others. It's like that thing, right? When one person runs a marathon at this speed and they break a barrier, then they break it for so many other people. So the more we can
Mm.
look at our own beliefs, those that have the power, those that, not power, that's the wrong word, the privilege to be able to do that, need to be able to use that ultimately for the good of everyone. Because the more, my energy lead used to say, she was like, the more light you integrate in yourself, the more you do it for the planet. Because the amount, literally the amount of light you're bringing in, the amount of consciousness, the amount of presence you're bringing in, is serving the whole, because there's no separation between you and another. So, anyway, before sharing that, so freedom,
Mm.
um, um, freedom, freedom, freedom for me. I think we could take this again in like a multi-dimensional way.
Where do you think it fits into like what we're talking about? And is it a perspective? Is it completely perspective? Is it choice? Is it choosing one thing? Like, is that the only freedom that we get in life to make just like there's this I had a guy called Brian Reeves, and he has this book called Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her. And
Mm.
of course, incredible title. And it resonates deeply. Because if we're not making that choice, have we got freedom? And I know there's like the discipline and surrender. There's freedom within the middle of that. It's like that flow state to be in the middle of discipline, be disciplined enough to show up, and to keep showing up, but surrendering to the process. And is there freedom in that? Yeah, I'd love your perspective on where it does feed into this conversation.
Yeah, I think there's two things I would say. Like for me, as you're beautifully already touching on freedom, freedom is when you have a choice,
Mm.
when you're not acting from reaction and you're not kind of unconsciously feel like you're a victim in the world. But freedom for me comes when you understand that you have a choice, exactly what you said in terms of we have a choice how we layer life. Like it's raining outside, I could think it's inherently objective, the rain, ultimately on some level, but I could then layer that thinking with a thought, this is good, this is bad. And that's going to create a certain frequency in my being. And so, and that's just a thought that I've just layered on top of life. And so,
Mm.
for me, choice is recognizing freedom is recognizing that you have a choice how you layer life, basically, how the
Mm.
beliefs you have, the thoughts you have. Oh, and that takes discipline, because it takes discipline to come out of the unconscious wiring of the mind that we've been conditioned to be in terms of reaction or fear or lack or whatever it might be, and to come back and be like, oh wait, I have a choice to, I mean, Eckhart Tolle speaks about this beautifully. He's like, if you have like £1 in your bank account, the mind would probably understand and be like, oh my god, what am I going to do? Whoa, like stress. But actually, if we went to the Buddha, it's just one, like it's just ultimately it's slightly objective. Like it doesn't, it's not inherently, same with money, actually inherently. Money is neither good or bad. It's just thing that the mind then layers a lot of different conditioning around. It's good, it's bad, it's not spiritual, it's spiritual. So for me, freedom is when we realize that we are not at the mercy of our previous conditioning or constructs or limiting beliefs, and that we have an opportunity to choose. And through that comes power and sovereignty and a new way of being that hopefully is more in alignment to our inherent nature, which is light, love, and abundance, whatever that might be. And I was going to say something else, what freedom is. I can't remember. For me, I also feel like I've meditated a lot this lifetime. And there's a teacher that said the more you can not think, the more you have the power not to think, just to have your mind be empty and silent and still, the greater freedom you have. And it's true. And I know that I can sit sometimes for half an hour without any thoughts because of the amount of discipline my mind has got in terms of just like it doesn't have to follow the narrative. And actually, in order to do that, there has to be a very deep level of trust, because the mind always thinks it needs to think in order to control life. It needs to control, plan. But actually, sometimes the deepest freedom is to not think and to surrender and to trust that actually life is inherently loving. It has your back, that you are inherently life ultimately. Again, dissolving the mind so that you can realize there is no separation between you and life, between you and other. So there is a freedom for me personally in terms of not needing to follow the mind, not needing to go into fear. Like Eckhart Tolle speaks about this, when you're in bed and you might be like thinking about a future moment and your whole body's getting really stressed and anxious because it's like playing this potential scenario in your mind, and then you suddenly realize in that moment you're actually in a quiet room, nothing bad is actually happening to you in that moment, hopefully, that you're at peace ultimately, that everything that your mind has just taken you on is an imaginary projected future that may not even happen. And for me, when we catch ourselves doing that and have the power to come back to what is actually happening right now, which usually we can always handle in this moment, that for me is freedom, because we have this choice whether we're going to follow the fear or whether we're going to come back to just what is, maybe the breath, maybe the body.
Do you remember the time in your life where you didn't feel that way and you couldn't not think? Was it?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Are there like little moments of it now and again, but do you remember, like, do you recall that maybe it was, you know, more than, I'm not sure on your age, but before you're 18, like, do you recall then of like these moments that are so consuming that everyone can relate to?
That
What
you
was
just
that?
can't stop thinking, you mean?
Yeah, just the perpetual.
All the time. It's like a balance, because the more my teacher used to say this, it's like a pendulum. Like, so meditation is like going to the gym for the mind. Well, our natural way of being is to be permanently in an unconscious story of the mind, worrying about past, worrying about future. But ultimately, the past and future in this moment are just imagination. They don't really exist in this moment, but we're inherently always compulsorily, unconsciously lost in this narrative. And so meditation is just this like very, it's about disciplining and moving every time you notice the mind wander into an imaginary future path, you bring it back, and then you move out, and then you bring it back until it kind of brings up its own momentum. And that's what she speaks. She was like, it happens until one point, there's like a tipping point where the stillness is so strong that it almost tips you more into the stillness than the incessant narrative of the mind. And that is an ever deepening journey. I don't believe anyone who says, oh, I've got there, I'm like fully enlightened now. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's an ever deepening journey that requires discipline and practice, because there's so much momentum in our unconscious living on the span of how many thousands of years that goes into the fear, that goes into the conditioning. So yeah, there's definitely times when I perfectionism can sometimes go in other ways. And how I got into meditation, I started at 18. I started teaching at 19 because I was so passionate about it, because I was like, this can change people's lives. I was just, it changed my life. Because weirdly enough, I remember so many bad things happened to me, like one thing after another, after another, after another. And I remember in my head, you know, do you ever do this when someone, well, I remember doing it a lot when I was younger, someone asked me, they were like, how are you? And I'd be like, well, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this bad. I remember it so well because there was this one week where just so much bad stuff happened. And everyone would ask me, and I was like, and then I read The Secret at like 18, and I was like, do you know The Secret? That book? Yeah. And I was like, oh wait, my thoughts create my reality. And I had unconsciously been focusing on all the bad stuff that was happening. And so I was just calling more and more of that. And it was a really memorable experience, I remember. And that still can happen again 100%, but it's less so. But yeah, I think it's inherent to the egoic mind that it likes to think a lot, it likes to worry a lot, it likes to overthink, it likes to overanalyze.
Mm,
That's its nature, and so much kindness to it and no judgment to it. But we have the power to also awaken from it.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing. Not judging the thoughts because it just perpetuates them or creates like an opposition. And it's such a part of you that actually just wants to be heard. It
Like it's
wants,
just mine. Sorry. Yeah.
no, yeah, yeah. What are you going to say?
It's just the mind judging the mind. Again,
Not going to
yeah.
win.
Like sneaking in the back door, claiming to be something spiritual and helpful, but actually still the mind being like criticizing.
Yeah. I've got a question. I feel I can ask you. Talk about control and conditioning, capitalism, and how we are so conditioned to think a certain way about work, life, business, festivals, events. Like, do you grapple with this? Like, how do you create healthier systems that aren't so entrenched in power and one kind of hierarchy? Is this something you've worked with, and yeah, how do you navigate that within what you do?
Hmm. Very good question. I love that you throw that one in.
I know. No, I
So,
couldn't do that with everyone.
okay.
It's
um,
it's an assumption that you have definitely thought about this.
hmm. So I, before I said yes and soul yes to doing Heart of the Rose and having an incredibly hard time with it, getting very stressful. Anyone who wants to make money, don't run a festival. Anyone who wants to have a relaxing life, don't run a festival. There is not money in festivals. There's not money in events. They're very stressful, inherently very stressful,
Yeah.
especially kind of working with your ancestral land and clearing a whole lot of stuff as well. So I remember being so burnt out in the first year. And I've been burnt out many times. Like I remember when I moved to America, I had to work 3 jobs and doing free psychology at nights and pushing myself way too hard. And I remember there's someone called Claire Debras who ran a charity called Tree Sisters. And I had a very profound experience watching her talk about Tree Sisters in my early 20s. And her whole thing was that she had an accident and she suddenly got shown the vision of Tree Sisters, and she was shown that in order to heal the planet, she had to like connect people back. She had to connect women specifically back to the land, to the trees. And I'd love to speak about that in more detail because there's just so much to it. But so she was always an inspiration to me, and she'd been running Tree Sisters, which got very big in these last 10 years. And she, by some miracle, came to Heart of the Rose, which was just a dream come true because she lived in America. She was like, it was very small. It was very small at the time. It was like 150 people, 150 to 150. And she just left Tree Sisters. And I had messaged her because in these last 4 years doing Heart of the Rose, it's been insane. And I'm doing a lot of it, like booking all the marquees in January, doing all the toilets, doing all the marketing, doing all the curating. It's a lot. And not only that, doing Brotherhood of the Rose and doing so many other things. And I remember calling her last year and being like, how do you do this while honoring your cycles? Like you actually can't.
Mm.
So for me, I've obviously learned and understood as a woman that I need to honor my cycles. But when it's my spring and summer, I have more energy. I'm more out there. When it's autumn, winter, I need to rest. And obviously, in our culture, rest is like a swear word, or has been a swear word. We have been conditioned to go, 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 because we've been inherently living in a patriarchal world. That's not a judgment of patriarchal men. We've all unconsciously said yes to being in this world. And I'm talking yes on a soul level to incarnating at this time, in this time of forgetfulness. And lockdown, when I was teaching a lot over lockdown, because everyone needed therapy and meditation, and some people were just so loving it because they had permission finally to stop. And I remember saying to Glenn, I said, look, how did you do Teresa's? Because she was so like, this is it was for women, by women. And I was like, how did you honor your cycles, as in like rest once a month and do all this and create this massive business? She was like, I couldn't do it. We had every intention to do it in the first few years. Like they would really take moon times off and like go and rest. And she was like, it just couldn't happen because we're still in this world which is inherently like even Instagram is inherently, one could say, patriarchal, and it's competition, it's comparison, it's you've got to do it a lot in order to get the algorithms. Like it doesn't allow you to stop and rest and not be seen and not be present if you want to have as many whatever you want people following. So for me, it's been a really interesting journey to find a new way, or to try and find a new way myself. And there's I haven't been able to find. At times, I have. I think it's moving from this energy of like, we think we need to create all the time. That's the masculine, which is beautiful, but it hasn't been balanced with the feminine, which is around receiving and the receptive nature, and actually just being and allowing things just simply for your frequency to come to you. But we don't actually always need to go out and push and push and push. Actually, if we just rest in our heart, in the love or once we are, that actually inherently starts to come. We've forgotten and how to do that. So I think women, and why there's infinite deep things that I can share on a greater way, why I feel women's vessels are important. But one of these pieces is to find a new way that we can be in harmony with our cycles, we can rest, and we can change this capitalist way of being through that. But that can only happen when women kind of have to be the way shows of it, because men don't have cycles similar to women. Like women need to rest, or else they literally, but we've been pushing through. Women take the pill all year so they don't be in limit. Do you know what I mean? Like they completely deny aspects of their inherent cycle. No judgment, that's just how the world is conditioned in this way. But yeah, we need to find a new way. It's almost like we need to bring people back to our inherent cyclical nature, to honor that, so that we can honor it for life as well, because we haven't, as we with the environment.
What do you think has to happen for that to take place?
Yeah, I think well, for me, I'm biased, but women need to come together and the men need to come together, and the women need to, this is my work with the Brotherhood of the Rose as well. It's like, and what I'm doing medicine, which is like, how do we start to honor the feminine again in all of life? So that is the body, that's the emotions, that's the heart, that's earth. We've been inherently conceptual and intellectual in the way we approach all of life. We basically are here when we say who we are. We've forgotten that this is like sacred and holy. And so the collective awakening and what's happening right now is starting to understand that actually it's safe to start to come down again. Like we need to start to experience the body, matter, the mother as sacred again. In order for everything to come back into balance, we need to remember that we're inherently connected to the cycles of the earth. We're inherently connected to the earth, but we've forgotten because we've been inherently disembodied, because patriarchy is inherently overly to do with the intellect, to do with concept, to do with living from here. Emotions bad, body, sexuality like bad or slightly disordered. As in, I'm also talking about awakening. So like the awakening path inherently on life is being transcendent. It's like, let's try and reach an imaginary God, man in the sky out there. Let's put the sacred out here. But actually, what needs to happen is to remember that the sacred is here. And for women, this inherently happens because, for example, our moon cycle of 28 days, it links with our womb. We're inherently connected to life differently from men. So women need to remember this in order for life to remember it, in order to everyone to remember that we're inherently connected to life. And when we remember we can start to come back into balance again. So it's really about remembering the feminine, not just women, the feminine within all of life.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and also no, it doesn't, and that's okay, right? It doesn't need to make sense for me because sometimes making sense is measurable change, and that's also a masculine wound. So what comes up for me when you talk about creation versus reflection, like I'm very okay with doing that. I'm very centered when it comes to allowing space and reflection. But what but what then comes in is how do I measure that that's worth it? Or like how do I measure that the reflection is beneficial? And then I'll generally be like, well, if that helps me create more, great, because then I can create and then I can make more money, and then the money is related to my worth, and then the money is how I measure success or what's good. And that's not healthy for me. I know that much.
Mm.
So yeah, there's more I can learn here, I think, with 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 just reflecting and being in that feminine rather than having the kind of masculine hold over the feminine side of me, which is always how do I measure this is productive, essentially.
Um, yeah, there's again so much I can say, but also so invite if what I shared didn't make any sense, and please like let me know which bits I'm
Yeah.
making because there might be someone else who's like don't know what you're saying.
No,
Um,
it's understandable. Like I understand what you're saying 100%, and I'm so on board with it. But
you don't have to be too. I
no, I
enjoy.
know, yeah, I know that. I think the sense making sometimes, yeah, I guess because it was predicated on the question that, ha for me, maybe it wasn't too explicit, but how do we shift culture? How do we make real fucking tangible change? In balancing out what is more harmonious for our bodies and ourselves. And I'm then looking for like real results and real like measurable change. And I don't and that's a part of what's stopping it, no doubt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that yeah, and I think the measurable change it's happening more and more just the way we start to become aware of the
Hmm.
way we have been habitually unconsciously living in and being conditioned in this capitalist patriarchal society, and just even becoming aware that oh wait, I'm pushing myself way too hard because I believe that is what's going to show my worth, that's going to make me worthy, that I'm going to be good enough, I'm going to be valued from that. Even just becoming aware and then being kind that okay, no wonder that's how I've been acting because that's just how I've been conditioned, no wonder. And then being, as you're beautifully saying, questioning, is there another way? And as I mentioned, it is hard because we are still in it, quite in it, but there are ways we can change just through simply giving ourselves the permission to rest and recognizing, as Common saying, like we're not human doings, we're human beings. Like we've completely devalued the feminine, the being aspect of ourselves, which is the more yin, the more receptive. And
Mm.
actually, there was a few cultures that said that actually, even when women, so when women bled once a month, they would go into their red tent and they would rest and it would be their dream time. And actually, the whole community used to apparently do that. So men would do that. It was permission for everyone to stop and to honor the feminine aspect. So the feminine aspect is like the dark moon, it's like the winter solstice, it's the time of like rest and renewal. And because we have neglected the feminine and the worth and value of this and put all the worth and value on the doing and being, it does need the women to remember this because we need to rest during that time, and so we can invite the men to do that too during that time. It almost gives permission to be like your worth doesn't just come from doing, and we need to be kind to ourselves as a collective as we're changing into this new way of being that is hopefully going to be less capitalist, that is going to be more heart driven, that is going to be more embodied. And as we're in the transitional period, be kind to ourselves where we are sometimes needing to
Mm.
play into the game in order to um, be seen or be heard or to share what we're called to share ultimately in service. until hopefully I do believe that we're moving in the right direction ultimately through these gatherings, through these other things of us waking up, or certain amount of people coming together to wake up to that. Oh wait, there could be a new way. this
Mhm.
this but it's not easy. And I think, as you beautifully started the question with, question I always like to ask everyone is like, but what's the kindest thing? So I think by us bringing more kindness to like, okay, yes, I'm running till I'm burnt out. Well, no wonder, because that's just what I believe unconsciously is what I should be doing.
Mm.
And then also kindness to the part that's like, and I want to change, and maybe it's hard, and also maybe I can. Do you know what I mean? Just like not blaming ourselves, not judging ourselves. And from that, there's something called the paradox of change. We think that we can only change when we reject what is, when we say, okay, this isn't good enough, I need to get there, so I try and push this. But actually that's unconsciously splits us a little bit. We're like, a part of me is bad, I'm going to go there. And so this is what I do with my psychotherapy, something called internal family systems, which is parts work, where it's saying the paradox of change is that actually, can I accept this moment? I might not like it,
Mm.
but can I just embrace what is, without adding infinite layers of stories that this should or couldn't be there? And from that place, from acceptance, can I move into a new way of being? It's a very different energy that's a bit more holistic and integrated and embodied, that's saying, okay, I have this part, no wonder. And I don't know if that clarified anything.
Yeah, for sure. I think the word should be removed from the dictionary. I don't think it, again, it's a should that should. So it's a kind of paradox in itself. Um, but whenever that word is present, I'm always like, oh,
Mhm.
oh, and it's because it's it is predicated on someone else's idea or your perception of others' perception of you. So I definitely think it's worth taking stock of when that word is present, what you feel like you should be doing. Um, go ahead, yeah.
And that's also why I feel like the stillness is so powerful and has been in my practice, or why I emphasize so much, because it's almost like, and then we come back to the one that is even aware of the one that is judging should or shouldn't. Do you know what I mean? And there's this
Mm.
aspect of our being that is untouched by the should or the shouldn't. That is the deeper aspect of our being that ideally we want to be living from always, in some way.
Mm.
Yeah, it's just taking another layer almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I heard
Yeah.
something the other day that I wanted to share, and it would likely feed into the Brotherhood um, and the seed that took place this year, 22nd, yeah, June you had. So I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit more and what the idea or vision was for that. But it was something I heard around, and it's so obvious, and I love hearing things in a different way that I like, of course, but it was just said at the right time in the right way that it really landed around initiation, and that women, they are initiated by nature and men kind of aren't. Well, yeah, well, voice changes, but it's like there's not really something that happens for us. So that is a clear demarcation of like why there has been initiation for boys and men and why that's needed in our culture. So yeah, love you to talk about the brotherhood and I guess the overlapping rose and what the idea around that is, because the rose is a theme. And I know we could talk about the rose probably for the next half a day, but yeah, the brotherhood of the rose. Is that it? Is it the
Yeah. Who told you? Who shared that? I'm curious, around the that women are initiated.
Oh, it's Jordan Peterson, so he's holding nothing back in his in his opinions. And being very, very like, but yeah, it was good. He did a podcast with Joe Rogan. Wow, it was like a 3 hour deep dive on religion, but yeah, it's powerful.
So, or you like, so much I could share. I'm going to just talk specifically because in order of what you shared. So, in England, there used to be something called the Holy Grail rites, because as you mentioned, women inherently, their rites of passage, as first rites of passage, their first initiations, their menstrual cycle, they're inherently brought down into the earth, into the darkness, into the unknown. Men don't have that. They're built in a different way. And so they would have to have these other kinds of initiations, and initiate each other in different ways, and maybe go into the wilderness for 3 days and maybe do something else. With the Holy Grail rites, what used to happen supposedly actually in England was at 21, on the winter solstice, which is the peak feminine aspect of the year, men would come to the women and be initiated into the darkness. At 21, they'd be initiated into the dark feminine. There's supposedly a lot of I can't remember the words, what that word is. There's a lot of things written that men tend to get most oppressed in wintertime and will try and leave and go somewhere sunny all the time because they're inherently solar beings. They haven't necessarily been initiated into the darkness like women
Wow.
have, into holding that darkness and to knowing how to navigate it. And so the women would help to initiate them. That was the rites of passage that used to happen. We've obviously forgotten that. Women have forgotten how to be initiated. We are taught to reject our menstrual cycle, to shame it. So we're also not really receiving it. And we've also therefore lost our power, and therefore we've forgotten how to also support the masculine in that. And so what you shared is very true, that like, yes, there used to be these rights, or that women are initiated in a different way, but we used to support the men being initiated in different aspects. So the men would be initiated in their own way, but in terms of the dark feminine aspect. So that's what we're missing. So right now in our collective, we've been like this, and this is all leading to the Brotherhood of the Rose. We've been, as I mentioned, God out there, got to get higher and higher, lift the vibration higher and higher, get out of this body. Like, let's go to a monastery and let's take vows of chastity because the body's bad, it's not sacred. Let's get away from life to find God out there. For women, that doesn't happen. For women, we find our spirituality here. In some traditions, the crown chakra for women is actually the base chakra. So we actually find God down and through the body. So this is really big because we've forgotten so much. We've forgotten how to be initiated into these bodies. We've somehow unconsciously deemed them as less than sacred, as evil, as wrong, whatever it might be. But for women, our bodies are so sacred. There's a beautiful Sufi, Llewellyn Pauline, he says the women contain within themselves the light of creation differently from men, because whether or not they choose to give birth, they can bring the light of a soul down and through their cellular body. And so they carry a different kind of seed of creation. And when women remember that creation, they remember it for all of creation, and life can start to come back into balance. And so I share this now because for us, the womb, the body is sacred. That's how we connect to God. That's how we connect to life conditions. So not to forget to shame the body, to make it wrong. So I share all of this because the Brotherhood of the Rose. So I'll start with the rose. The rose, I didn't have a connection to the rose until 5 years ago. And a teacher, not teacher, an astrologer, she said to me, on this night, your north node will Saturn will cross your north node Aquarius, and you'll get shown your destiny. I thought I knew my destiny because at 18 I'd been shown this vision that I was to create this temple. So I didn't think much of it. But in that night, I went in and out of consciousness chanting the way of the rose, the way of the rose, the way of the rose, literally as if my body was remembering this kind of lineage. Got up, Googled the way of the rose. There wasn't really much out there, to be honest, around it. And so I asked my guys, like, what is the way of the rose? And they said, it is the path of embodied love, which is what I had kind of been teaching, which is kind of the feminine path. The path of embodied light is the masculine, the solar masculine. The path of embodied love, the heart, is the feminine, which has kind of been missing on the planet in some way. So all the wars and everything. And they said the rose is a symbol of this. The rose is a symbol of the divine feminine, the divine mother, and this path of love that is needed on the planet at this time. I then found out that the rose was actually lineage. The way of the rose was a lineage, that it existed in many different places. It's quite cosmic. In Lemuria and Atlantis, it existed in the Egyptian mystery schools, it existed in the Knights of the Templar, that it existed in England quite a lot, and that it was now coming back to be remembered. And then a few weeks later was when I had the vision with the land, with the Women's Festival. And I was originally going to call it the Way of the Rose because I'd had this dream before, which I hadn't really understood, but it ended up calling the Heart of the Rose. Anyway, so then, as I mentioned, prefacing all of this, we've gone really over, haven't we? Sorry, prefacing all of this, time. I had this vision around Awaken festival. So I was really confused because I was wanting to do this all men, women festival. But then I just got shown to do a women's festival, which I trusted. But for me personally, I was confused. And I was like, surely everyone is meant to awaken at this time on the planet. And And then it was only this year, or at the beginning of this year, I was contemplating how there wasn't really a men's festival. At the time, I hadn't heard of any men's festival that was similar to Heart of the Rose, that had 500 men, that had different facilitators throughout the world. Since then, I have heard men's fests happening and other things, but at the time I hadn't. And suddenly I had this massive lightning bolt download for like literally 3 days. I didn't sleep. That's what sometimes happens when I get these visions. And it said you were to create a men's festival and you were to call it the Brotherhood of the Sun. And it's to happen on the summer solstice to honor the solar masculine. And it will be the brother to Heart of the Rose. So I was like, oh God, universe, you want me to create a men's festival? Like the amount of projection I'm going to receive for that is probably insane. So I was definitely terrified. I had to go through a lot personally in order to feel permission to be able to support the seeding of it. And my guide said, this year it needs to be called Brotherhood of the Rose, because it needs to call in the men who truly understand that it is only through the rose is a reflection of the feminine. It is only through the heart that they integrating their own inner feminine can they step ever more fully into their masculine. So they said you need to call it Brotherhood of the Rose so you can see the festival, this new men's festival, with a specific heart frequency energy that hasn't really existed before. And they said you needed to do it because you have already created on the land this rose. And because originally the women used to initiate the men in some form, and because at this time in her story at this time on the planet, we are moving into the return of the feminine. We are moving into this new time of the heart, this new time of embodiment, this new time of remembering we are inherently unconnected. It is women who are the way shows of that. So they are the inherent birthers, right? They are the inherent resurrectors and birthers. They bring the new life into the form. And they said you need to be the one to seed it. Also because I'm to be the guardian of the land, the first woman to inherit in many hundreds of years, that somehow I needed to be part of the seeding of it, especially since it was to be the brother of Heart of the Rose. So yeah, that was seeded. It was so beautiful. A white stag appeared at sunrise, and the next morning. I mean, it was incredible. It was the white stag being a representation of the divine feminine, and it came up, and it was just amazing. And we learned mostly through it was how the amount of feedback we got from the men in terms of having a space held by women, the permission it gave them to soften and to not have to put on this kind of like arm in some way or needing to prove in any way. And it was just kind of really profound. And the rose is this kind of unconditionally loving, soft, welcoming, and also strong with the boundaries and the thorns. She's an amazing teacher, but yeah, so it's probably the rest.
Wow. Does it feel like a lot of responsibility? Do you feel that responsibility, or is it?
What I have felt is that I've had a lot of visions about this life and what the things I'm going to be called to do. And this is like 1%. So that's what scares me. It's like these are like seedings of something that feels really amazingly epic, because I do genuinely feel and it's all now making sense. So I don't know if you know about the kind of hero schema, the alchemical marriage, which is
No, but we're not getting into it.
no, but I'll just say that the land wanted the women to heal first and is now wanting the men to heal ultimately so we can come back into
Yeah,
harmony. But it kind of needed that, and it feels like that's a microcosm, a macrocosm what's happening right now. Like
sure.
we're visually needing to remember before we can ultimately come back and heal all the trauma that we've been experiencing for many lifetimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned projection? Do you face some?
Projection.
Is that the cost of it, you think?
My human design is a projector, I think. So yeah, I don't think it was really helpful for me to understand that, because yeah, it's really easy, especially this role. I mean, you know what? I think festivals do. I know that I've been festivals and I'm like, they should have done this and they should have done.
Yeah,
Actually, when you're behind the scenes, just staying alive is enough. Like, I have so much compassion for event organizers and just
yeah.
everyone, because yeah, just like no wonder. So much kindness to all of us on this journey.
Mm,
Um, and such a lesson in not taking other people's views of us
mm.
seriously or internally. Yeah.
Have we missed anything that you feel is crucial to speak about right now?
Um, just thank you for letting me to share on here, and also for inviting me on, and for um letting me share quite cosmic and deep things. And yeah, no, I think that's it. I think medicine's this weekend, so if anyone will go out after medicine, but yeah, that feels powerful and exciting because I'm going to be doing some men's initiation there as well. Terrifying. It feels terrifying to me, but it feels needed at this time, like to really understand that um yeah, the return of the feminine within us all and how needed that is.
Mhm.
Um yeah.
Yeah, maybe round two we can talk about what the experience was like for me.
Yeah, you come? Oh, that'd be
I'll be
amazing.
there. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. Yeah,
Bookmarked, and that's not common. So yeah, I'll definitely be there.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I really have so much time for what you're doing and being, and it's yeah, it's exciting. It's very exciting. I love that all these things scare you, yet you're doing them anyway. That shows a lot. And
Yeah.
it's really, I see, yeah, such a courageous person, and I'm just celebrating you, honoring you for taking action, because there's nothing without action. It always action. Um, so yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to get to know you a little bit more, and yeah, connect with you in person. It's gonna be
Yeah,
fun.
me too. So soon as well, like 2 days. So
I
yeah.
know. Yeah, lovely. And where can people, do I guess, yeah, this will be out before Heart of the Rose. So are you at capacity? Like, how's it feeling? And where do people, yeah, get involved? Where is it? Where is it? Tunbridge Wells, I think.
Oh, yeah, so it's a beautiful deer park called Eridge Park, one of the oldest deer parks in England. It's so beautiful with red springs and white springs and caves
Wow.
and lines. It's yeah, we still have tickets, so so check it out. We've got an
Hmm.
incredible lineup, like a really like people, teachers I've wanted to get for like 4 years are all coming this year, so it feels like it's going to be very,
Mm,
very powerful. Um, yeah, so come check it out, come join us. It'll be really beautiful. Um, and yeah, thank you, Chris, for all you're doing and all your sharing, and yeah, all you're bringing into the world. Honoring you too.
thank
And
you.
look forward to meeting
Awesome.
soon.
Yeah. Gosh. All right. Thank you.